As a retired teacher, I look for ways to save money for the things I love, like traveling the world. Medicare plans change each year. Fortunately, my Health Mart pharmacist helped me understand my insurance, saving me money on prescriptions. And they can help you too. My pharmacist cares about my health and the things I love, whatever that might be.
Health Mart, caring for you and about you. Visit healthmart.com for the locally owned pharmacy near you.
Times are different than they were when Geico started saving people money over 75 years ago. Everybody takes photos of their food nowadays. You can bet none of us kids would snap pictures of Mom's tuna casserole surprise. To this day, we don't know what the surprise was, nor do we want to. We didn't always have tasty food, but we always had great car insurance with Geico.
Geico, saving people money on car insurance for over 75 years.
Kind of got away from our regular intro music to play that one of my favorite Johnny Cash tunes. Everybody knows that song, and I think that's probably the first thing that you think of when you hear the term Folsom Prison. Johnny Cash in Folsom Prison. And so my band plays it. In fact, we just did it the other night. It's a great tune. And, Johnny Cash apparently shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. And if he was incarcerated at Folsom Prison between 1895 and 1937, well, then he probably would have been hung from the gallows at that famous prison, which hung 93 men between 1895 and 1937. And it's just a fascinating story. There's a book out, Folsom's 93, The Lives and Crimes of Folsom Prison's Executed Men. Hi, I'm George Yates. This is Justice for All. Welcome to our show today. I'll be here for the next couple of hours. And as you know, I'm an attorney in Virginia Beach that practices, of course, all over this area. I do a lot of criminal defense and personal injury work, and this radio show is my hobby that I do every Saturday from 2 to 4. And the name of my show is Justice for All, and this is a show today about 93 men that received the ultimate justice. They hung from a rope and from the gallows at Folsom Prison. April Moore is with us today. She is the author of Folsom's 93. How you doing, April?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, I read the book, and it's fascinating. You do a great job of chronicling each of these condemned men, 93 of them.
Thank you.
Tell us about yourself. You're April Moore. You're from Colorado, and you wrote this book about this infamous California prison. Tell us, how did all this get started? I know that's an interesting backstory and how you received the information to write this very cool book.
Oh, thank you. It was kind of a bizarre, sort of fell in my lap kind of project. It really kind of began back in the 1940s. I had a great-great-uncle who lived in L.A., and he apparently was a bookie, and he sometime in the 40s went up to Folsom Prison to collect from an inmate who owed him money, and he left instead with a box of mugshots and also a 40-page text chronicling the history of Folsom from, like 1850s when it was first the planning stages until 1943. And the mugshots were of all 93 men who were executed at Folsom. And he didn't know what to do with them, I guess, and he put them in a suitcase in the closet and forgot about them, basically. And in 1979, when he passed away, my aunt found them and showed them to the rest of the family. And I probably didn't see them until the mid-'80s or late 80s And so when we were kids, she'd bring them out, and we would make up stories about them and kind of just try to figure out what they did. But at the time, at that age, I had no idea really what I was looking at. So then it wasn't until 2008 that I came across a copy of the text. And I thought, well, God, I wonder what happened to all those pictures. And my grandparents had them. So my grandfather sent them, and it just kind of all started from there. I really had no idea what I was going to find. I was more curious just because I love history. And it really just began with a Google search on one of them and ended up finding several newspaper articles on it. And that's sort of where it all began.
So this book, it starts out, now your uncle who's the bookie, he goes to the prison to collect on a debt, and he ends up with a bunch of mugshots. Now, wait a minute. I'm not getting that. You mean the guy didn't pay off? He didn't give him any cash? He just says, wait a minute here. That's kind of like Jack and the Beanstalk, right? He's going to sell the horse, and he ends up with magic beans. How did he end up with these mugshots?
We really don't know. My aunt thought perhaps the warden gave them to him, but I don't know if he collected them from the inmate. I really don't know the exact transaction and what happened. All I know is that he went and he came back with them. The Jim Brown, who is the curator at the Folsom Prison Museum, thought that maybe an inmate was entrusted to kind of type out the history of Folsom from other resources, and that maybe this was an unofficial copy of mugshots that were made. Really, it's kind of the mystery. I really don't know how he ended up with them.
Well, your stories about each inmate, his crime, his trial, his punishment, well, ultimately his punishment, but the appeals, I mean, some of them were executed within, 3 months, and then some of them went 3 years or more because they would appeal. And they're all fascinating stories, and it's really the text behind. When you first saw these mugshots, they were just the photos. Did you have anything with them telling about each man in the trial, or did you do that research separately in order to? Because each one of these mugshots are accompanied by text describing the crime and the execution ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the back of the photo has their name, when they were received at the prison, when they're executed. Typically it has their age, and it might give a little bit of information about his crime. So that's really all I had to go on. But thanks to Google, I was able to find newspaper articles and also books and legal journals and things that talked about the cases.
Oh, so you did all this research yourself then. These it wasn't just here's a box of stories and you just write them up. You had the photo and you said what's the backstory on this? So you wrote all these backstories. That's well good job. It's very well researched. And I used to live in Washington State, and I've lived in California as well, and it's such a fascinating. It's like a real history of that part of California, really between 1895 and 1937. So many of these crimes take place in that Central California area, but then the travels of the criminals, they're out in Reno, they're down in Mexico, they're up in Washington and Oregon, they go up into Canada. And so some of them are coast to coast travelers, and so it's a real mid California as well as Americana story, isn't it? And when you start researching these stories.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a part of not just California's history, but U.S. history. And all these men came from different walks of life. They came from different countries, different states. So they have ties to different places across the country, whether it was where they grew up or where their parents live. So you can almost connect some of them to just about anywhere.
You have some great quotes under each picture of each of these condemned
that was the funnest
men.
part, was trying to find those.
Here's one. Edward Delahunty, December 6, 1912. He says, "This is going to be my execution and the only one I've ever had, and there ain't going to be no wailing and gnashing of teeth." Now tell us about, I'm sure you got some favorites in here, but just as I read it, this account goes from 1895 to 1937, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And at that was the year that execution by hanging was banned in California, and they went on to the gas chamber.
Right.
And so these people, these were 93 men. They all dropped through that trap door on a hangman's noose, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's just a violent kind of death. You just can just vision it. The 13 steps they walk up. They've got they stand there. They put the hood over their head. They strap their knees together, their ankles together, their arms to their sides. Some of these guys will still have a cigarette in their mouth while they say "goodbye, boys" or "hello, boys" or the final words. Anyway, it's just great. Listen, we're here with April Moore. I'm George Yates. If you've just joined us, our show is Justice for All, and she's written the book called Folsom's 93. I'm taking it that this book's available on Amazon and in Barnes & Noble, or people buying this book. It's been, how long when was this book released?
It came out in the summer of 2013, so about a year and a half ago.
Great.
And it's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, just about anywhere you can find it. You should be able to find it.
Well, so, I mean, there's so many fascinating stories. I guess one of the most interesting one is the fellow who faked his own death to get out of, he found some vagrant or some drifter. He killed him, burned him. Tried to make it out that was him so he could collect some insurance money, I guess, because he was in debt and he wanted his wife to get the money. And then later he said, well, he went on the lam. It turned out that everywhere he went, he knew people, right?
Yeah. Even the people who found him knew him. He would run into people in Reno who knew him, and the poor guy thought he saw a ghost, and so everyone thought they had buried this man. His wife didn't even know that he was alive, and even after he was captured and awaiting trial, she still didn't know he was alive.
Yeah, because they didn't want to tell her because she'd been pregnant, I guess, with his son, and actually had the child, and she was then in the hospital, and she was sick, and her friends just didn't want to tell her. Said, "Well, no, he's alive," and they couldn't even tell his own wife that he was alive.
Right. They thought it was too much for her. I mean, it was interesting how they would clip out. They would give her the newspaper, but they would clip out articles, anything about him, and they wouldn't let her see the newspaper, saying it was bad for her eyes. And they also had a daughter who was, I think, around 9 at the time, and someone would take her to school and walk her home. She wasn't allowed to play with other kids. She couldn't look at the newspaper. It was just an endeavor just to keep these two from learning about this woman's husband and father.
Who is your favorite of all of them, if you could pick one?
Oh, my favorite. I have so many.
Well, go ahead. Just tell us. Pick your top 3, and I'll just let you go. Tell us your favorite 3, if you will.
My absolute favorite is probably Jacob Oppenheimer.
I just
number
saw
28.
that one. I'm flipping through the book right now. Go ahead.
Jacob Oppenheimer is certainly my favorite of all time. I was so intrigued with his case, or his several cases, and his story. He was just an incredible case study in a way. He spent 16 of his 18 years in solitary confinement, yet he was this incredible writer and had this amazing insight into the outside world and the human psyche that was just remarkable. And many of his writings are in the book and for people to read, because it was just fascinating what he did with his time. I mean, he was framed originally when he was sent to Folsom and was given 50 years, so he had nothing to lose, and killed a few people in prison. But his story was probably one of my favorite to write, because there was just so much on him, and I found it very interesting.
So he went to jail. He was framed. He did not commit the crime that put him in Folsom, but then once he was in Folsom, he killed a few people.
Yeah, he was framed for a robbery. I mean, he certainly wasn't an innocent guy. He had committed other robberies with a few others, and they were kind of like the usual suspects. So when he didn't partake in this particular crime, but the cops, of course, were like, hey, we really want to get this guy anyway. They struck a deal with the others, and they arrested Oppenheimer and So he was given 50 years. Basically, to him, that was a life sentence. So he had nothing to lose, and he ended up killing the man who framed him. And that was actually the first inmate killing at Folsom Prison. And that was in 1898, I believe. So he attacked a lot of guards, other inmates. For someone being in solitary confinement, he did do a lot of damage.
Yeah, he's number 28 on your list, executed July 12th, 1913. Called the worst criminal in California history and dubbed the Human Tiger. And he spent 18 years in solitary confinement. Amazing. A great thinker, reader, and writer. You describe him. His murderous career eventually caught up to him. And I guess this is one of his dying comments when he said, "So, the sooner I cash in my chips, the better, as it will save me a lot of trouble and unhappiness."
Yeah, he fought to the end, and he had an attorney who worked pro bono for 6 years to free him, or at least to keep him as a life termer. He's actually the only one of the 93 who was hanged for assault and not murder.
Now, why was he in solitary for so many years? Just because he was so dangerous to the other prisoners?
Yeah, pretty much. He had attacked guards because he had shuffled between Folsom and San Quentin, and so he would attack a guard at San Quentin and then be sent to Folsom, and then he would attack someone at Folsom and be sent back to San Quentin. So he went back and forth quite a bit, and because of all the attacks, they just deemed him completely. They deemed him as an incorrigible, basically, and they kept him locked up 24 hours a day. He'd be let out for exercise, I think, once a week.
Yeah, and you have an excerpt in your book regarding his account of his 110 hours in a straitjacket.
Yeah, which was very common punishment back then. I mean, corporal punishment really wasn't abolished until 1912, but even after then, it was still routinely carried out. So.
He says he says had he been offered a dose of poison, he would have drunk it with gratitude.
Yeah.
It's an instrument of hellish torture.
Yeah, there have been men reportedly who were killed from that treatment, who were permanently disabled.
Well, how do you? For 4 days they leave you in a straitjacket, so they don't give you anything to eat. You can't go to the bath. What do you do? They would
give you water. If you're lucky, they would give you some water to drink. But your body couldn't really process it very well. But no, you were left alone on the floor of the cement floor, and left in the straitjacket, and hope that you learned your lesson from whatever it is, whatever infraction you committed.
You would bet it had to be attacking a guard.
Usually, yeah. And I don't think it took much to get them in there. Any type of infraction, it was pretty brutal in those days.
If you've just joined us, I'm George Yates, and my show is Justice for All. I'm here with April Moore, who's a freelance writer from Colorado, who wrote this very cool book called Folsom's 93, about 93 men that were executed by hanging at Folsom Prison between 1895 and 1937. Yeah, you're Jacob Oppenheimer. You've got many excerpts from him. This book's available on Amazon, and we're happy to have Ms. Moore with us to talk about the book. Who's your second Oppenheimer? You devote quite a bit of your book to him. Final Thoughts of a Condemned Man. That's just amazing. Remorse is the disagreeable phantom of an evil action, he says.
He was just so interesting. He provided all the information for me, basically. I just had to put it together.
How did you find all of his writings? Were they somewhere? It's not like he didn't have a website or anything.
I wish. No, there was a biographer who had written his story, and I believe his writings are available. I don't know. They could be at the Library of Congress. But the biographer, I believe, has passed away. And the book that was written was 20 years ago, and he had access to all of Oppenheimer's writings. So he had printed many of them. So that's where I got most of them.
So who was your second favorite after Jacob Oppenheimer?
Well, I have to say I liked working on Adolf Weber's case, the 20-year-old who had killed his family, presumably to keep them quiet about a bank robbery he committed just months earlier.
Oh, my gosh. You kill your whole family so they won't turn you in for a bank robbery.
I think he may have had some mental issues. This was in Auburn, California, and he was from a very prominent family, and he had a sister, a brother, and his parents, and they lived in this stately house just outside Auburn, and the house was on fire one evening, and their neighbors came to get them out, but all the doors and windows were locked. They assumed the family was not home. So they broke into the house through the windows to get out furniture and anything else they could save, and they stumbled upon the bodies of the mother and the sister, and they pulled them out, and they had been burned, but they were pulled from a room that hadn't been touched by fire yet. So after they had dragged out the bodies and the body of the younger brother, they determined that the mother and the sister had been shot, and they didn't know where the father's body was. And the Adolf Weber was he was sitting outside under a tree watching this all unfold.
Sweet little boy. Nice kid.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. I don't guess too many people mourned his death when he dropped through the trap door, huh?
No. And you know what's interesting? All of the evidence against him was all circumstantial, yet he did it. and it was just interesting because of his demeanor throughout the entire trial, and he proclaimed his innocence throughout, yet
he was sitting there right outside watching everything happen. I mean, that's pretty amazing defense. Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I've had a lot of people on my show. We've done some death penalty shows. We've had people from the Innocence Project here, and the big worry, of course, these days with DNA and all this kind of stuff is that, right. If you'd condemn somebody to death, as they say, as the Supreme Court has said, death is different. It didn't seem to bother the Supreme Court of California too much, or the governor. Most of these men applied for clemency, didn't get it. Mm-hmm. Did you find any men that were hanged that you truly believe did not commit any crimes at all, that were framed or for whatever reason were actually innocent? And if so, how many?
I certainly have my suspicions about a few, probably about 8 or 9 of them. I think in particular, even just the first case, Chin Hain from China,
Tell us about that case then, and maybe the ones that you think are the most innocent. We'll take a little break in a little bit here, but I want you to, when we come back from the break, tell us about Chin Hain, and then when we come back, maybe let's go through some of the ones that you truly believe didn't do it and why you think so. But let's start with him.
Okay, sure. Chin Hain, he arrived in San Francisco the night before a huge riot, and because during that time there were a lot of wars between the Chinese gangs that were just wreaking havoc across Sacramento and San Francisco at that time. And he had arrived in Sacramento, I think, the night before the shooting.
And this was when San Francisco was the largest city in California. I mean, right. It was long before L.A. had become the big city.
Mm-hmm. Right, and it was really kind of held captive in a way by all of these wars between these gangs. So it wasn't unusual to have shots fired and people ended up dead in Chinatown. It was a common occurrence. However, this cigar shop owner was gunned down, and the wife said the wife who had witnessed it, she said it was Chin Hain, and then the cook said it was, but there were so many witnesses, and he had actually several alibis of where he was. He was, of course, smoking opium in another room in another part of the city, but
of course, opium was perfectly legal in those days,
right? And so he had an alibi, yet he had these 2 witnesses that claimed he was the one who shot the cigar owner. And so they arrested him and another man, based on witness testimony. However, there were several witnesses, and handfuls of witnesses said this is not the man, this was not the man. And it later turned out, too, that the cook had disappeared even before the trial started. And he had claimed right after the crime happened, he fired a shot. And incidentally, his is the only gun that was ever found and the only shot that was ever heard. And he disappeared before trial. The wife disappeared shortly after trial, and it was suspected that the cook and the wife were in on it, and they fled to China. And there were just all these witnesses who said Chin Hain, that was not the man, but he had a scar down his face, and that kind of proved the linchpin in his conviction.
Wow. We're going to take a short break here. We're with April Moore, the author of Folsom's 93. We're going to get back and see if author Moore can describe some more men that were swinging from the noose at Folsom Prison way back at the turn of the century that perhaps did not commit these crimes. We'll be right back.
If finances are holding you back from enrolling your kids or grandkids in private Christian schools, call the radio station at 488-1010. We have a partnership program with several schools on the peninsula and the south side that allows us to offer a 35% discount off tuition for preschool through the 12th grade. Give us a call today at 488-1010 or visit our website at tuitionsolution.org. Did we mention we added daycares to the site? tuitionsolution.org.
RM Designs T-shirt printing and more is located in Smithfield, but serves all of Hampton Roads. They specialize in vinyl design shirts, apparel, window stickers, cups, and other specialty gifts. They also have rhinestone and embroidery designed apparel, and they offer Pandora-style beads and hardware to create a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more caters to businesses, sports teams, churches, groups, and family reunions. They also offer a great fundraising package should you be in need of money for a special project. And they also do home parties if you and your friends would like to get together and make your own creations. RM Designs T-shirt printing and more can be reached at 757-255-9140. That's 757-255-9140. Email them at rmdesigns11@aol.com or find them on Facebook at RM Twisted Designs. You can also place orders directly off their store at storeenvy.com/RM Twisted Designs.
Nor'easter season is here, so don't get all wet. Protect your house. Call Crawl Space Door Systems at 363-0005. Reduce your flood insurance, reduce the threat of mold and insects, and save energy. Crawl Space Doors, air vents, flood vents, vent covers, and fans can help you stay dry or get you dry quickly. Contact Crawl Space Doors for more information at 363-0005 or online at crawlspacedores.com. Stay dry, my friends.
I bet there's rich folks eating in a fancy dining car. They're probably drinking coffee and smoking big cigars. Well, I know I had it coming.
Well, we're here with the author of Folsom's 93 and that Folsom Prison Blues tune from Johnny Cash. Just want to, before we get back started, just want to let you, everybody out there, know that this portion of our show is sponsored by Bayside Harley-Davidson, who is... it's Virginia's largest Harley-Davidson dealer and one of the top 20 in the country. I don't think anybody really realizes what an incredible resource we have right over there off of exit 5 on I-264. You can drive right by it when you're coming down 264 there, right near the tunnel, right near Frederick Boulevard. So 2211 Frederick Boulevard, Bayside Harley-Davidson, Virginia's largest adult candy store. So you want to get out there and make your dream come true. You know, it's January. It's a little cold out there, but I think we're already thinking about spring and the days getting longer every day. And I don't know if your dream is to have that motorcycle and be out there riding with your girl on the back of the motorcycle and riding down the road on a beautiful sunny day. But if you are thinking about making that dream a reality, why don't you go over to Bayside Harley-Davidson and let them give you a test ride. They're open 7 days a week over there, so open early in the morning until late at night. That's Bayside Harley-Davidson, and we're really proud to have them with us on our show and sponsoring Justice for All here every week on Saturday from 2 to 4. And we're going to get back with April Moore here, who's the author of Folsom's 93, And we've been talking about some of the men that she thinks might have been condemned to the gallows who didn't commit the crime. Outside of the very first one in your book, Chen Hain, back in 1895 when he hung, who else do you think probably didn't do it, April?
I question number 12, Harry Winters. I think he wasn't there, present at the crime, and there's the two men who did do it collaborated this. Winters was, I wouldn't say he was 100% innocent. He did know the crime was going to take place, but he was told by one of the men that he didn't want Winters to be involved, and so Winters was not. And so, but one of the men escaped, and the police knew there were two men. One of them got away, and they linked Winters to it and said that he was the one who pulled the trigger when it was in fact the other man. And even after they caught the other man and he confessed and he said, no, Winters wasn't involved, it was me, they still hanged Winters.
Well, do I have something's wrong? My book here has Frank Ballou as number 11.
Right.
And then I turn the page over and I go right to 13. Who is number 12? I don't see 12.
So number 12, if you look back on, I'm looking at my pages right now too. Number 8 and number 12 are grouped together.
Ah, okay.
Because, number 9. Number 9 and number 12. Because, C.H. Raymond was one of the men involved, and he was hanged first. And then because Winters appealed several times, his case, he wasn't hanged until later. But the publisher and I agreed to combine both their stories.
I see, got it. So Harry Winters, you don't think he participated in the murder?
I don't. And so that one was, I'm not saying he was 100% innocent, but I don't believe that it was just necessarily to hang him as well. Harry Eldridge, number 20, who was involved in the 1903 break that resulted in 13 prisoners escaping with only 5 returning, and 1 guard was killed. Harry Eldridge was one of the 2 men hanged for that murder of that guard when it was determined, actually, that 2 other convicts killed that guard. Yet Eldridge was still held accountable for that.
All right.
Number 22, William Gray. He was convicted of killing a man from China in an alley and in Sacramento, and the victim was dying in the alley, and his friend came up and said, "Oh, who did this?" And he said that it was basically a big black man, and that was all they had to go on. And there was no, as far as I know, there was no physical evidence that linked William to it at all, except for his description.
So someone said a black guy did it, so they grabbed the first black guy and hung him.
That's right.
That happened a lot back in 1906, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and on the scaffold in 1906 when he was being hung, his final words were, "There could be no God, else an innocent man would not be hanged."
Right.
That's just got to get to you.
Did
he appeal, or there was just no appeal to that, huh? It doesn't look like he
I don't believe he did. But even if he was, I don't believe he got a fair trial. Mm-hmm. There were witnesses who were intoxicated. There were witnesses who were deemed in other cases as unreliable. So I think it's another one of those cases where eyewitness testimony sends an innocent man to his death.
Oh, that's terrible. That's a tragedy. That's this one right here, William Gray, April 13th, 1906. And they say, finally, another black man fitting the same description had been arrested before Gray, but this was never addressed at trial.
Right. And, some of and it was interesting to read these trial transcripts and the case files where it was mind-boggling to me that attorneys never even brought up obvious questions, and that's where I just wonder. I just feel like he was railroaded through the whole process, and they wanted somebody to blame.
Well, it is amazing that because you do describe some of the travesties that occurred at trial, where in this case, hearsay evidence was admitted regarding the description, which should have been inadmissible. You're saying the lawyers just didn't even object to it; they just let it come in.
Right.
So it wasn't like they had objected, say, Your Honor, objection, hearsay, and the judge overruled the objection. You're saying the lawyer just got up there and never even objected. Right.
And the original description was never even written down by the police officer who investigated. So it's just mind-boggling to me how easily it can happen.
Wow. Any others besides William Gray?
There's a few. I questioned number 55 and 56, Ray Arnold and Edward Sayer, who were convicted of killing a shop owner. And the person who did it, the killer, actually committed suicide the next day. And he named these two as his accomplices, and neither one, they both had alibis, and their witness testimony was very sketchy. They first they said it was him, then they said it wasn't, and then they said it was him, Edward Sayer and Ray Arnold. There was no physical evidence that linked these two to the crime, and I think it came down to, the killer committed suicide, and I think prosecutors felt robbed of the opportunity to convict and hang men for the crime.
Yeah, they had to get their own little pound of flesh, I guess.
Right.
And Ray Arnold, this was probably one of the more interesting anecdotes that I recall when I was reading this book, was Ray Arnold, who avowed his innocence, and you believe he was innocent as well, stated, I am innocent. Please cut this noose into 13 pieces and give one to each juror and the judge who convicted me. And that was on the scaffold in 1927, the day that he was hung.
Right.
And he was denied that request. They did not cut that noose into 13 pieces and give it to the jurors and the judge, did they?
No, but the warden did. He did try, because I believe he felt he believed in the men and their innocence, and he did bring that request to the board.
Even the warden thought that he was innocent. Did the governor commute sentences back in those days? Even if the warden thought so, that was kind of amazing. They wouldn't commute a sentence.
Right. Oh no. I mean, this definitely went. That particular case, because I think it was Governor Young who he just said there just wasn't enough evidence for us to grant clemency, and even just reasonable doubt, but nothing. And he said it was probably one of the hardest clemencies to deny. But even, wardens, and there was a couple other cases where the wardens really believed that these men didn't deserve what they got, yet there's just that, unfortunately, is not enough. Their opinion is not enough to overturn any sort of decision like that.
All right. If you've just joined us, I'm George Yates, and this is Justice for All. We're here every afternoon on Saturdays from 2 to 4. And I'm here with April Moore, who's the author of Folsom's 93, and we've been discussing some of the famous and the infamous men who died on the gallows at Folsom from 1895 to 1937 before they abandoned the gallows as the way of executing people, and they went to the gas chamber. Now, when you did the research on this, and I'd like you to tell me at some point, I got two questions here. The next one's going to be, we've talked about the people that are innocent. I want to talk about who was the baddest of all of them. but I had another question before that, so keep that one in mind while you're thinking about it.
All right.
But we know that frontier justice was almost always the gallows out west. You horse thieves. You run the rope over We've all seen the cowboy westerns. You certainly don't have a gas chamber out on the range. So you throw the rope over, you put them up, you ride the horse off, and they hang and we've seen it on TV where the guy's kicking and it doesn't look like a particularly painless way to die. Did you research hanging by the neck, and how violent really is it? Do these guys die right away? Did anybody ever fail to die when they hung up? Did you research that part of it? Because it seems it is an interesting way of we've abandoned it now, and now we talk about how inhumane, even giving people lethal injections is inhumane now because we can't seem to kill people properly anymore. And so, what is it about the gallows? I'm sure you researched that. Tell us about it.
From what I've read, from what I understand, is done correctly, that hanging is quite possibly the most humane way to execute someone, and which we'll never know, unless we're hanged ourselves. But the thing about hanging is, if it's done correctly, you lose consciousness immediately, but your body is still shutting down. So it can take up to 20 minutes before you actually declare dead, and your body goes through violent convulsions, may lose their bodily function, use of bodily function, and often the bodies are twitching for several minutes. And it's one of those things that, people would watch. The gallows would be packed full of people, and they would watch these things, and it was like a spectator sport almost. But they would watch his body hang, and a doctor would come and with a stethoscope and periodically check and make sure his heart was slowing, and presumably he was unconscious and didn't feel a thing. But
do you have any photo? There's no photos in your book of the gallows at Folsom. Were you able to locate any photos of this famous execution method?
There's one photo floating around, and it's from 1933, and it was actually not the original condemned row or condemned room. And the original, as far as I know, pictures from that day, during that time period, I haven't been able to locate.
Right.
I've been in that room when I took a tour, but no, I don't have any photos of that actual room.
Yeah, the way you describe it, they had a death row there, and the next person to be executed was in cell number 1, and then the guy that was scheduled to be after him was in number 2, and so on. And so you would move up. Once they had an execution, if you were in cell number 3, then you're going to move up to cell number 2.
Yeah.
But now, describe for our listeners the actual process as you understand it. How someone gets executed. What is the procedure? They walk up the steps. I understand there are 13 steps. Is that just a coincidence that there's 13 steps, because of the 12 jurors and the one judge? And then there's also 13 loops on the noose that goes around their neck. But tell us the procedure that they go through.
Well, I don't know if it's a coincidence. Some of the officers I talked with at Folsom did say that is just a coincidence, and others say no, that was done there for a reason. The 13 steps and the 13 loops and so on. But the condemned man is housed in the condemned row, or it's also called the back alley at Folsom, and they're there from the time they're convicted and sentenced to death. So they're in this place, and they could be number 2, they could be number 3, but when the person is being executed, the rest hear it, and so they know what's awaiting them. But they would be put on death watch 2 nights before, and 2 guards would be in charge of making sure that he doesn't take his own life before, and given his last meal. And I think the warden would try to accommodate them as much as possible, whether it be food or music. Many would request having a phonograph playing records and having a good time. And I think the wardens would typically try to honor those types of requests when possible. And they would have their final breakfast in the morning, which, unless they requested something special, usually it was coffee, toast, eggs, things like that. And they would be strapped. They'd have their like a belt put around them that would then strap their arms to their sides. And sometimes they would have a cigarette, their last cigarette, as they're walking. And, I mean, it's actually a very quick and swift process. I make it sound like it's really this dragged, long-out process, but it's very quick. They walk them to the trap door. They put the black cap over his head. And typically, when it's asked, they're not typically asked for their last words on the gallows. Usually, the last words come from a conversation with the warden. Other times, they'll just yell out something. They'll just talk while the cap is being put on their head and the noose is being put around their neck. And one guy was cut off in the middle of his statement when they just released the trap, and there he went. But the signal,
you've got one fella saying, "Hello, boys." There's not much time. They walk him up the steps. They put him in standing on the trap door. They put the noose. They put the black cap first. Then they put the noose in. They cinch it up tight over his left ear, I believe.
Left ear, yeah. Let me look. I think.
And then they open up the trap, and then it's just just a few. Once it's in place, it's 5, 10, 15 seconds, and he drops.
Right.
How far do they drop before that noose tightens? Is it about 5 feet, 6 feet, 10 feet? Do you know how far?
Yeah, it depends on how tall they are. I know there's math involved and weight and how much they weigh, so how long the noose has to be. And typically they would prepare the noose weeks ahead of time, because it was made of hemp, and they would soak it in water and stretch it and soak it and stretch it until it was the right height or the right length for that particular man. I'm not real sure exactly the exact math of how that is done, but I want to say it's about 6 feet that they would drop.
And they have to stretch it a lot because they don't want it to stretch during the execution, because then it might not be enough to snap the neck and make for a humane death. If it just if it's all springy, the guy's just going to bounce right off and it won't work.
Right, exactly.
And so the process, I guess, just snaps the neck almost immediately, as you say. And so because of that, the person immediately goes unconscious.
Ideally.
And so did you ever have any accounts of where somebody went through and didn't go unconscious, or did they ever describe any times where it was just a suffering? Because it does appear to be a very painless kind of of an execution.
Right. As far as I know, I didn't come across anything that said they dangled that it wasn't done correctly.
Kept talking or anything like that.
Yeah, right. He didn't start babbling or anything like that.
Yes.
And according to the Folsom records, actually at Folsom Prison Museum, their records say that each one was done flawlessly, and that each one lost consciousness as expected, as hoped for. So,
right.
If there was, who knows? It's one of those things you just will probably never know.
Right. And they went to the gas chamber in 1937. Is that how they still execute people in California?
Yeah.
Of course, there probably hasn't been an execution in California in quite some time now, has there?
Not for a while, and of course they just suspended all executions this last summer, and I'm sure it'll get appealed. But gas chamber and lethal injection are the ones in California. And
we've really moved away. I mean, I'm in Virginia here, and we've of course between Virginia, Florida, and Texas, so the three states that it seemed to have been the most execution states in the last 20 years. But we're getting away from that here, even in Virginia. Very few. I mean, I'm death penalty certified criminal defense attorney. I go to the seminars all the time, and there's very few cases that they try people for the death penalty anymore. It used to be much more common. Now, I mean, it's not that we've abolished it, but it seems that in practical terms, we're getting away from prosecuting people for the death penalty. I think it's on its way out.
Yeah, I have to agree, and I think they're seeing, maybe not necessarily from an ethical point of view or anything like that, but from a financial standpoint, they're seeing how much it actually costs to keep people on death row rather than a life sentence. It's actually way more costly to keep people on death row. And they're seeing that this money could be spent in so many other ways to prevent crime, to be put towards building communities, and hopefully keeping people out of prison.
You know, the thing that's always bothered me about the death penalty is not so much it does satisfy some people's primal urges, you know, to see the fellow that killed your family dangling at the end of the rope. And it seemed much more fitting when I read a book like this and I go, well, it seems more fitting that within 90 days you're seeing this rogue meet his maker. Mm-hmm. But now you're not going to be executed for 10 or 12 years at least or more, and these people have changed they're not even the same person anymore. They've done all these wonderful things, and now you're killing somebody that's really not even living anymore. It's another person you're killing. And the other thing that I think that's changed is that the way, it was such a public spectacle. It seemed when you once again you see the old frontier, the people that need that kind of retribution, the ones that need to see it. They see it right there, and they used to invite people to come, didn't they? There was invitations,
they did.
So the victims
people requested, and they wanted to come, and
they abandoned that. What year did they say, well, sorry, we don't do that anymore, we don't invite people to come watch these executions?
Gosh, I want to say maybe around 1910.
So anymore, an execution is just kind of a sordid thing. It's like it's almost by the time it happens, it's so after the fact, and and the person's it just doesn't seem to make any sense in the modern world anymore.
It really doesn't, and here it doesn't deter crime, which it's been shown not to, and it feels it just brings justice to some families, and I understand that, but it doesn't do anything except create more grieving families. You have the victims' families, the original victims, and what they've been through, and then you have the family of the person executed, and then of grief that I think is unnecessary. And plus, I think the Innocence Project has now, and so is it worth those lives worth of a few heinous individuals? And maybe it is. Maybe the system is incredibly
from here.
And in the Middle East, Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. So, and between all those, 93% of the executions take place, and we're in that. We're among those folks. So.
Such great company to keep, isn't it?
Yeah,
when you're talking about being the United States of America, the great just country, and we're to be mentioned.
And we have the most executions, and we have the most 2 million prisoners in this country.
Well,
alone.
Then there's still plenty of people that believe in the death penalty, but more and more people who don't, and it's still an open debate, which is why we have shows like this, and we have great guests like you. Thank you so much, April, for coming on.
Thank you. I thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
This was really fun. All right. Well, listen, your book is Folsom's 93, and it's The Lives and Crimes of Folsom Prison's Executed Men by April Moore. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, great. Okay, well, then we're going to go ahead and say goodbye to April Moore, and we're going to say hello to the rest of you out there who want to listen to the next hour of our show, Justice for All. And we're going to go to a little CBS news break here, and then we're going to come back with the next hour, sponsored by Bayside Harley-Davidson, Virginia's largest adult candy store. We'll be right back.
If finances are holding you back from enrolling your kids or grandkids in private Christian schools, call the radio station at 488-1010. We have a partnership program with several schools on the peninsula and the south side that allows us to offer a 35% discount off tuition for preschool through the 12th grade. Give us a call today at 488-1010 or visit our website at tuitionsolution.org. Did we mention we added daycares to the site? tuitionsolution.org.
RM Designs T-shirt printing and more is located in Smithfield, but serves all of Hampton Roads.
News. I'm Pam Coulter. There's defiance in France after the worst terrorist attacks in the country in decades.
France